Top 5 Terrifying Stories from Reddit That Will Keep You Awake Tonight. Welcome back to another spine-chilling episode. Today, we're diving deep into the darkest corners of Reddit to bring you 5 absolutely terrifying real-life experiences shared by users who live to tell their tales. These stories will make you question what lurks in the shadows and remind you that sometimes reality is far more frightening than fiction. If you really like our channel, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more daily horror stories. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin. Story number 5, The Basement Tenant. Jake shared this experience from when he was house-sitting for his uncle during college. The house was old, built in the 1940s, with a finished basement that had been converted into a small apartment. The uncle mentioned that no one had lived down there for years, and Jake was told to avoid the basement entirely. For the first few days, everything seemed normal. But on the 4th night, while studying upstairs, Jake heard footsteps coming from below. Slow, deliberate steps pacing back and forth across the basement floor. Jake assumed it was just the old house settling and tried to ignore it. The footsteps continued every night, always starting around midnight and lasting for exactly 1 hour. Curiosity eventually got the better of Jake. On the 7th night, he decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he crept down the creaky wooden stairs to the basement. The basement was exactly as his uncle had described. Dusty furniture covered in white sheets, boxes stacked against the walls, and a small kitchenette in the corner. But something felt wrong. The air was thick and stale, with an underlying smell of something rotting. As Jake swept the flashlight across the room, he noticed something disturbing. Fresh footprints in the dust. Not just a few, but dozens of them, creating a worn path from one end of the basement to the other. The prints were clearly visible, as if someone had been pacing this exact route for weeks, maybe months. Jake's blood ran cold when he realized the footprints were still warm to the touch. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. Jake immediately called his uncle, who went silent for a long moment before admitting the truth. 3 months earlier, a homeless man had broken into the basement and had been living there secretly. The uncle had discovered him but felt sorry for the man and allowed him to stay, asking only that he remain hidden and quiet. But the uncle had lost contact with the man weeks ago and assumed he had moved on. Apparently, he never left. He had been living in the basement the entire time, emerging only at night to pace and stretch his legs while the house was supposed to be empty. Jake spent the remaining nights at a hotel, but the thought of that man listening to his every move from below still haunts him to this day. Story number 4, The Night Shift Stalker. This story comes from Sarah, who worked the night shift at a small gas station in a rural area. The job was usually quiet, just truckers stopping for coffee and the occasional local buying cigarettes. Sarah worked alone from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. with the nearest police station 20 minutes away. Everything changed when Sarah noticed a particular customer who started showing up every night around 2 a.m. The man never bought anything. He would simply enter the store, walk slowly through each aisle, and leave without saying a word. He was tall and thin, with greasy hair and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. At first, Sarah thought the man might be homeless and just seeking warmth. But his behavior was too deliberate, too focused. He would make eye contact through the security cameras and smile in a way that made Sarah's skin crawl. After a week of these visits, Sarah noticed the man wasn't leaving immediately after exiting the store. Security footage revealed that he was walking around the building, testing windows and doors, always staying just outside the camera's range. He seemed to be studying the building's layout, looking for weaknesses. The situation escalated when Sarah started receiving phone calls during the man's visits. The caller never spoke, but Sarah could hear breathing on the other end. The calls would come from different numbers, but the timing was always the same, right when the man was in the store. One night, the man's routine changed. Instead of leaving after his usual walkthrough, he approached the counter and stood there silently, staring at Sarah. When she asked if he needed help, the man simply smiled and pulled out a small notebook. He opened it and showed Sarah what was inside. The notebook contained detailed drawings of the gas station's layout, including the employee break room, the storage areas, and even Sarah's car parked outside. But most disturbing were the notes written beside each drawing. Details about Sarah's schedule, her route home, and even her home address. Home. Sarah immediately called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man had vanished. The investigation revealed that this same individual had been stalking night shift workers at various locations across 3 different states. He had never actually harmed anyone, but several of his previous targets had quit their jobs and moved away after similar encounters. Sarah transferred to day shift the next week, but still checks her rearview mirror obsessively while driving, wondering if she's still being watched. Story number 3, the Doppelganger in the Mirror. Emma shared this unsettling experience from her childhood home. She lived in a 2-story house with her parents and younger sister. The upstairs hallway had a large antique mirror that had been there since before they moved in. The previous owners had left it behind, claiming it was too heavy and valuable to move. Emma, who was 12 at the time, first noticed something strange while brushing her teeth one evening. In the bathroom mirror, she could see the hallway mirror's reflection behind her. For just a moment, Emma saw someone else standing in the hallway. Someone who looked exactly like her, but with a cold, emotionless expression. When Emma turned around, the hallway was empty. She convinced herself it was just her imagination, but the incidents continued. Always in reflections, always brief glimpses of this other version of herself watching from the mirror. The doppelganger's behavior became more disturbing over time. It would appear when Emma was alone, mimicking her movements but with a slight delay, as if it was learning how to copy her. Sometimes it would move differently, tilting its head in unnatural angles or smiling when Emma wasn't smiling. Emma tried to tell her parents, but they dismissed it as an overactive imagination. Even when she tried to show them, the doppelganger would never appear when others were around. It only showed itself when Emma was completely alone. Things reached a breaking point when Emma woke up one night to use the bathroom. As she passed the hallway mirror, she saw her doppelganger standing directly in front of the mirror, facing outward as if it was trying to step through the glass. But most terrifying was that the reflection was moving independently. Emma was standing still, but her reflection was pressing its hands against the mirror from the inside. Emma ran to her parents' room, but when they all returned to check, everything was normal. However, the next morning, they discovered something that chilled them to the bone. There were handprints on the mirror's surface, but they were on the inside of the glass, as if someone had been pressing from within the mirror itself. The family moved out 3 weeks later. Before leaving, Emma's father covered the mirror with a heavy blanket and nailed it to the wall. They later learned that the previous family had left for similar reasons, and the family before them had actually tried to remove the mirror but found it impossible to move, as if it was somehow fused to the wall. To this day, Emma avoids looking at mirrors in dark hallways, terrified that she might see her doppelganger still trying to break through. Story number 2, the thing in the attic. This story was shared by Michael, who inherited his grandmother's house after she passed away. The house was built in the 1920s and had been in the family for generations. While cleaning out the attic to prepare for renovation, Michael discovered something that changed everything. Hidden behind a false wall in the attic was a small room that didn't appear on any of the house's blueprints. The room was barely large enough for a person to stand in, with scratches covering every inch of the walls. Some of the scratches formed crude words and dates, spanning from the 1940s to just a few years ago. Most disturbing were the messages themselves. They weren't random scratches, but coherent pleas for help, descriptions of hunger and cold, and countdown marks organized by days and weeks. Someone had been kept in this room against their will, possibly multiple people over the decades. Michael immediately contacted the police, who conducted a thorough investigation. However, they found no official records of missing persons that matched the timeline indicated by the scratches. It was as if whoever had been kept in that room had been completely erased from existence. But the discovery of the room wasn't the end of the story. After the police finished their investigation and left, strange things began happening in the house. Michael would hear scratching sounds coming from inside the walls, always at night, always from different locations throughout the house. The scratching would start soft, almost like mice, but gradually become more intense and deliberate. It sounded like fingernails dragging across wood, the same type of scratching Michael had found in the hidden room. Sometimes the scratching would form patterns, 3 short scratches followed by 3 long ones, then 3 short again. SOS. Michael installed security cameras throughout the house, hoping to catch evidence of what was causing the sounds. What he captured was far worse than he expected. The cameras showed the walls themselves moving slightly, bulging outward as if something was pressing against them from inside. The movement always corresponded with the scratching sounds. One night, while reviewing the footage, Michael noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the background audio of one recording, barely audible beneath the scratching, he could hear what sounded like whispered voices. Multiple voices all speaking at the same time, saying the same thing over and over. "Let us out." Michael has since moved out of the house and is trying to sell it, but potential buyers keep backing out after spending time in the property. Some have reported hearing the scratching sounds during their visits. Others claim to feel like they're being watched from inside the walls. The house remains empty, and locals have started reporting that they can see scratches appearing on the outside walls, as if whatever is trapped inside is trying to claw its way out. Story number 1, The Midnight Visitor. Our final story comes from David, who lived alone in a small apartment complex. He was a light sleeper and often woke up during the night, which is how he first noticed someone standing outside his bedroom window. David lived on the second floor, which made the presence of a person outside his window immediately alarming. The first time he saw the figure, he assumed it was a tree branch or shadow playing tricks on his eyes, but when David looked more carefully, he could clearly see the silhouette of a person standing motionless on the fire escape. The figure appeared to be tall and thin, wearing dark clothing that made it blend almost perfectly with the night. It stood completely still, facing the window for what felt like hours. When David tried to get a closer look, the figure would disappear, as if it had never been there at all. This continued for several weeks. The figure would appear at different times during the night, always in the same position on the fire escape, always staring into David's bedroom. David installed blackout curtains and called the police, but by the time officers arrived, the figure was always gone. The apartment complex's security cameras were old and poorly positioned, capturing only blurry footage that could have been anything. The building manager suggested it might be a neighbor sleepwalking or someone using the fire escape as a shortcut, but David knew this was something more sinister. The situation escalated when David began finding evidence that someone had been inside his apartment. Small things at first. Books moved slightly, furniture shifted a few inches, food missing from the refrigerator. Then David discovered that someone had been sleeping in his bed while he was at work. The sheets would be warm and rumpled with an indentation in the pillow that wasn't there in the morning. David set up a hidden camera in his bedroom and finally captured the truth. The footage showed his midnight visitor climbing through the window around 3 a.m., moving through the apartment with practiced familiarity. The person knew exactly where everything was, moving silently through the rooms as if they had been there countless times before. Most disturbing was what the person did while inside. They would sit on the edge of the bed for hours, just watching David sleep. Sometimes they would gently touch David's hair or adjust his blankets. The footage showed this had been happening for months, not weeks. When David confronted the building manager with the video evidence, he made a shocking discovery. The midnight visitor was the previous tenant of that exact apartment. The man had lived there for 15 years before being evicted for non-payment of rent. He had apparently never accepted that he no longer lived there and had been breaking in regularly, treating the apartment as if it was still his home. The police finally arrested the man, but not before he revealed something that haunts David to this day. He had been keeping detailed journals of his visits, documenting everything about David's daily routine, his habits, his schedule. He knew more about David's life than some of his closest friends did. David moved out immediately, but the thought of someone watching him sleep, someone knowing his most private moments, still gives him nightmares. He now sleeps with multiple locks on his doors and never opens his curtains after dark. These 5 stories remind us that the most terrifying experiences often come from real life. Whether it's discovering someone has been living beneath your feet, being stalked by a stranger, encountering something supernatural, or having your privacy violated in the most intimate way, Jake, Sarah, Emma, Michael, and David experienced horrors that will stay with them forever. The next time you hear strange sounds in your house, see something move in your peripheral vision, or feel like you're being watched, remember these stories. Sometimes our instincts are trying to tell us something important. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this dark journey, hit the like button and subscribe, New horror documentaries every night here on TrumbleDreams.